All right, in this video, we're going to talk about how to group specific items to be styled in a similar manner, and two different ways to do that. That's going to be using classes and using IDs. So we'll start off with classes. A class can be defined to group specific elements that should be styled in a similar way. So in this table, I have 16, or actually I have 12 pieces of data. Table data, table data, table data, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Those are all table data objects. If I were to inspect them, I should be able to see that each one of these elements is a table data. And if I click on the next row, I should be able to see that each one of those elements are table data. Okay? The idea is that since I want all of these tags to be formatted similarly, I'm going to give them all a class. So if I look at what this looks like in my code, I'll go to my table. I have this table tag opening, and then in this first element, I'm going to give the first table data element the class of tag. That's going to be this column here. And in my second table row, I'm going to give the first element a tag class. Okay? In the third row, I'm going to give the first element, the tr, a tag class. Okay? So since I gave all of these elements an attribute of class equals tag, I can then go into my CSS document and say, all right, this is all standard. We saw that in the last video. Table dark gray, table data has some padding, but this class, I'm going to use the dot tag, and then I'm going to give all of those the property of a minimum width of 60 pixels and a text align of center. I actually have a mistake here because I don't really need those separated into two separate things. Be one block of code. I also give them the font family monospace, which makes each character the same width. And the background color, I chose floral white. We talked about the different colors before. You can just start typing. So if I wanted a blue, I could start typing blue. If I wanted like green, I could start typing green. But I'm going to stick with that floral white. Okay. The next thing that I did was I went in the second column and I gave all of those items in the index.html a class of name. So I used class equals name on the second piece of table data inside each row. And then in my style.css, you can see I gave that a width of 100 pixels. So it made this 100 pixels wide. In the first column, I made that a width of 60 pixels, and that allowed me to text center and make that table make that piece of data in the table be centered in that row. Okay. I also have an odd row class. So if you look back on my index.html, the first row, I gave it the class of odd row. The second row, I did not. The third row is 3 is an odd number, so I gave it an odd row. And then in the style, I gave the odd row a background color that was just a little bit different than the background color of the table. So I've got this alternating color scheme, which makes my table very easy to read. So that's a pretty common one to use. So that's classes. Remember, with classes, you want to, on your HTML document, give that element an attribute of class equals, and then within the quotations, whatever you want to name that class. You can name them whatever you want. And then in your style sheet, you use the dot and then class name. And then you give it its properties and values. The next thing that we're going to talk about is IDs. IDs are more specific. They will override any classes that you have. So down here in the second section, I talked about IDs, and I gave these an ID of fancy. Okay, I've given an H2 element an ID of fancy. I've given a paragraph an element of fancy, and I also gave inside this list, I used a span tag to say, okay, in this list item here, I want to span from this word from vestibulum to vestibulum. I want that span to also be fancy, which is why this line or list item here has only from vestibulum to vestibulum styled in this fancy way. Okay, now down here on line 61, I gave this third list item the ID of fancy. And inside style.css, I said hashtag fancy or pound symbol fancy is going to have a font size of 1.4 rem. So it's font size 1.4 rem with a hyphen, 40% bigger than everything else. Cursive, which gives it that kind of slanty cursive looking font. Uh, a background color of burly wood, and a color of indigo. Okay, and so we can see, oh, 1.4 REM is pretty big. I think I'm going to adjust that down to 1.1. So it's a little bit bigger than the text next to it. It's got the background color and the color for those IDs. Section 3 is your turn. What I would like you to do is fork this REPL, which is WebDev 7. And I want you to come into the index.html in section 3, and I want you to uh, make all of these list items. I'll show you on the large page. All of these list items have used the ID of plain, and I would like you to add some different text color to the ID of plain. So you're going to make an edit on the HTML page as well as an edit on the style.css page. Okay, oh, wrong spot. So make some edits here. You'll also make some edits here to change the styling of the plain ID.